Check, check. Hey, John, I see you online. Can you hear us in here? Sorry, I'm just doing a sound check.
Yes, I can hear you and see you. Can you hear me? Are you able to hear me, Chris? Are you able to hear it, Chris?
I'm gonna work on a sound check issue with Boom.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to the July 15th Board of Supervisors agenda or meeting. So we'll start the agenda. All right, if we could all rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I just want to announce that the township just met a short while ago in executive session to discuss legal and it's really just legal issues. Yeah. Can I have a motion? We were going to do this. Unfortunately, Pete can't make it. I was hoping he would be able to make it for a public comment, but since he's not able to, can we have a motion to amend the agenda to discuss the letter he spoke about last month? So we have time to just present it.
I'll make a motion that we amend the agenda to include the letter that the supervisors have drafted to the governor of Pennsylvania on the Chester Water Authority.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, so we'll do that after public comment, correct? So do we have any public comment? Nope. All right, no public hearings. And then, so the letter, like I said, I'll just go ahead and read it out. This was requested by Pete Mrzinski and Keep Water Affordable last month. And this is with his input and blessing. Dear Governor Shapiro, the residents of New Garden Township are among the 200,000 residents of southeastern PA served by the Chester Water Authority. Despite being unanimously rejected by the CWA Board of Directors, the sale of CWA to Aqua PA has been proposed as a one-time revenue source to aid the city of Chester in its bankruptcy proceedings. The sale of CWA would only be a one-time infusion of cash to the city of Chester and would not address the systemic issues faced by the city that caused the bankruptcy. The issues facing Chester should be mitigated at the state level as they have grown beyond the ability of the city to handle them, and saddling the residents of the city, along with everyone in the CWA service area, with an increase in their water bill is not a long-term solution. The consequence of the sale of CWA to Aqua PA will be a dramatic increase in the water bills of everyone in CWA's service area. At its most recent rate increase in 2022, Aqua PA raised the rates for recently purchased municipal utilities by anywhere from 50 to over 100%. CWA rates will need to increase by 137% just to equal Aqua's rates. CWA is a well-run, financially secure, and award-winning regional water supplier. Its sale will provide no quantifiable benefit to CWA customers, only higher bills. We respectfully request that you, as governor, take the position that you do not support the sale of CWA as a means of rescuing Chester, as our experience has shown that it only results in higher rates for residents with no meaningful long-term benefit. Respectfully, New Garden Township Board of Supervisors. Just to confirm, everyone is comfortable with signing that? Yeah. Yeah, great. All right, any input from the public about that? No. Okay. All right, and then we'll move on to presentations. We have our recognitions, I'm sorry. We have a township presentation to Mighty Riders.
Push it 3 times. Good evening, members of the board, members of the community. On behalf of New Garden Flying Field, New Garden Township, it is with great honor to be here tonight to acknowledge and support a remarkable organization within our community, the Mighty Riders. Mighty Riders is an extraordinary nonprofit dedicated to teaching kids in our community to think clearly and to write with clarity. Their mission to help young people develop strong and written skills, which is critical for success in school and beyond, is something we deeply admire and are excited to support. Thanks to the incredible efforts of our airport team, the township staff, volunteers, sponsors, and the enthusiastic support of the community, our air show was a tremendous success. It is with great pride and gratitude that I present on behalf of the airport a donation check for $2,925 to Mighty Riders. We believe in your mission, and we celebrate the successes that you have. We would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to everyone who has made this possible, the Board of Supervisors, the attendees, the volunteers, the sponsors, and the incredible team behind the air show. Together, we have not only celebrated aviation within New Garden Township and the region, but have also contributed to a brighter future for our youth supporting Mighty Riders. Thank you, and here's to a more successful airport community partnerships in the future. Please come up.
That sign out a little bit more, just closer to me. Yeah, that's wonderful. And one more. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, John, and the representatives from Mighty Riders for everything you do, and hope to see you all again next year. All right, we have the Bowman ready.
And this is another quick sound check with John Urich on the call. Can you hear us? And let's make sure we can hear you.
I can hear you, Chris. Can you hear me?
All right, I still got nothing.
Can you hear me, Chris? Hold on a second.
We'll just give a quick pause here, but I'll pull up your presentation. Still can't hear you, John. You can hear him on the Zoom? Okay. And if not, and we can keep going, we can do the public safety briefs and then come back to this while we're figuring this out, so.
Okay, while we work on that, we can go to approve the minutes. And do we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes, or if there are any corrections?
I'll make a motion, we adopt the minutes as submitted.
Okay, we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? Nope. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nope. All right, minutes are approved. Right, then, can I have a motion to approve the paid invoices in the amount of $247,852.13 and unpaid invoices in the amount of $527,366.86 for a total of $775,218.99?
I'll make a motion to approve the paid and unpaid invoices and the amounts that you cited. Steve, do you want to say your piece?
Second.
Second.
There's one invoice for my employer for services rendered in the amount of $1,100. I'll have to abstain from action on that.
Other than that, any discussion? Nope. All right, all in favor then, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm here.
Thank you.
Can you hear me, Chris? Testing,
And then we will
Testing.
go on to the public safety reports.
testing.
Evandale? Or have you got, no? Might have a workaround.
Testing. All right, hold on.
And John, we can hear you, but faintly, if you can turn up. the
Can you hear me
volume.
now? Is that any better?
There
Is
you
that
go.
enough for
Yeah.
people in the room? Yeah, you have to talk really closely into your microphone. I know you have one of those headsets on, but if you can just all the way up there,
All right. How about that?
good enough. All right.
All right. All right, just let me know when you want to jump into the presentation.
And John, let me know when you can hear the, or excuse me, see the screen share with the presentation.
Yes, I can see it now. Thank you.
And just let me know when to advance and I'll go ahead and.
All right. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for making some time in the agenda this evening. I know you have a fairly full agenda, so I'll kind of keep it brief, a little bit of background, and then get into some of the recommendations, probably at a higher level. We'll have the draft presentation or draft report done shortly, which we'll share with our study advisory committee, and then get it out for board reviews. So we were at London Grove Township last week, and tonight, thank you again for having us here in New Garden Township. In terms of, if you could advance, Chris, just some background on the project. I'll cover that first. You can advance, Chris. Are you able to hear me in advance?
Yeah, John, the screen share up here in the room is different than what's being broadcast through the Zoom feed and live on YouTube. So there's a bit of a disconnect. If you have your slides locally, I'm on the project needs slide. If you just want to do it internally, and just let me know.
Okay. All right. We'll do. Okay. Project needs. Yeah. So we have everybody knows Route 41's been an issue for a long time. Long-standing safety concerns, traffic congestion. There's been, a multitude of prior studies that luckily some have advanced into improvements that PennDOT is currently working on in various stages. And, and there have been some new land developments come in along the corridor as well that are proposing some changes to the corridor and some improvements. So the purpose of the study was kind of to take a fresh look at this corridor and see if we can develop some cohesive vision along the 10-mile stretch of the roadway through the different municipalities that abut this major corridor, and then identify a future framework for transportation improvements. Next slide. We'll go to is some additional background. This study, as you know, is being funded by a VPP grant from the Chester County Planning Commission, and it's a multi-municipal study that involves Londonderry Township, London Grove, New Garden Township, and Kennett Township, and Avondale has been involved in the process as well, but they're not a grant partner. And again, in the 10-mile stretch of this corridor, it ranges from Route 796 to Route 7. Next slide. So working with the committee, we developed a vision for this study and for the plan for Route 41. And we really want to make sure that the recommendations promote safety, convenience for the users, as well as accessibility for all users, whether it be motorists, truck drivers, pedestrians, bicyclists, you name it. So, and we also want to make sure that the recommendations reflect the character of the diverse communities along the corridor. So some of the key considerations we are focusing on in this study is corridor safety, congestion, truck movements, flooding, and accommodating pedestrian and bicyclists. And as I mentioned, there's multi-municipalities as well as a range of different characteristics throughout the corridor. So we've broken up the corridor into 4 segments. The first segment, starting kind of to the west or north in Londonderry, starts at Route 796 and continues to Route 1. Then the second segment goes from Route 1 to Avondale Borough. The segment 3 is its own segment within the borough, and then on the southern border of Avondale, we pick up with our last segment down to the Route 7 interchange. One more slide, if you can go advance that, Chris. I think I can see what you're showing now on the screen.
2 key considerations.
Yep, the next slide. Yep, shows the map. Yep. So basically, this map just shows the limits of each of the segments that I just described. All right. So next slide is the planned improvements. Skip ahead. That's just a page break. So as I mentioned, PennDOT, as you all know, PennDOT has a few key projects in the study area. I guess 3 roundabout projects. The Route 41 926 roundabout project is just beginning its construction phase. The roundabout project in Route 841 is wrapping up its preliminary design, and then or moving into preliminary design. Sorry, the route. If you can advance, Chris, I guess I can show you the concepts. Yeah, so this is Route 926 roundabout, which is in construction. The next slide will show the current alternative that's preferred. That this is about to move into preliminary design. They're just wrapping up with the alternatives analysis and maybe tweaking this just ever so slightly, but this appears to be the concept that they are moving forward with for the 841 intersection. and the village, the Chatham Village area. Next slide. And again, preliminary design for the Route 1 interchange at 41. We'll have 2 roundabouts on each side. So those are the major roundabout projects. And then another project, if you can advance the slide. We don't have a concept yet as it's in the preliminary studies, but PennDOT is evaluating the bridge over White Clay Creek, as well as the State Street intersection just to the north of this picture. They are considering some different alternatives or concepts. You know, they're working with the borough and trying to finalize those concepts. It sounds like the most feasible improvement through the area might be a second southbound through lane, but PennDOT has to further evaluate some of the historical resources and make sure that Avondale Borough is in support of the project as well. So they're in that process right now and working through that. But the bridge, addressing the bridge is PennDOT's priority, since it has been restricted with a weight limit, and they don't want to further limit that. Next slide. I think most people in the room have seen a version of this concept, if not this concept. And this is a concept that was developed for the White Clay Point land development, a mixed-use development that would have significant improvements along the corridor, realign some intersections, provide some signalized access points, as well as additional travel lanes that would pick up heading southbound, and at the Route 7 interchange, 41 in the southbound direction would that second travel lane southbound would drop off to the Route 7 ramp, and in the opposite direction, the Route 7 ramp would pick up as a second through lane through the development area. And these improvements are generally consistent to support some major commercial development along the 41 corridor. So we can go to the next slide. So the process that we've been dealing with, we have been working with a study advisory committee that has a representative from each of the municipalities, including Avondale Borough. We've also we held a online public presentation in January. We got great participation for that. We followed that up with an online survey, which was open for about a month. And the next slide will have a little bit of detail. And then we are doing these draft recommendation presentations. And then we'll have the draft study available as well. So the next slide just touches on a couple of the responses that we got. We have more that will go into the report, but just as a kind of a high level summary, we had over 250, nearly 300 responses, and we got a lot of responses from the people in the adjacent municipalities. We got pretty good response from New Garden residents as well. Not surprising, the major issues were traffic congestion, truck traffic, and driver behavior, as well as speeding and congestion. So those are all things that we continue to focus on. They are in our key considerations. So we will be addressing those concerns. And then the next slide. So this is a planning study that doesn't involve new traffic counts, traffic engineering analysis. This is really kind of melding past studies together to create a future plan that the municipalities can work with. So what's going to shape these recommendations are the prior studies, the PennDOT plans, new developments along the corridor that we're aware of right now. Some current observations without doing detailed engineering, as well as outreach and feedback we get from the various communities. So that's really what's going to shape the recommendations today. So there will be some recommendations that are we are going to recommend some future study. As everybody in the room knows, I guess New Garden is ahead of the curve on that, as we're underway on a Act 209 transportation impact fee study, where we're going to develop capital improvements that are based on new traffic counts, traffic analysis, future growth forecasts. So we'll have a little bit more specific recommendations in that study for New Garden intersections, as opposed to some of the other ones, which will be more higher level. So just stay tuned for those recommendations as part of that effort. Next slide. So we get into the recommended improvements, and we've been kind of going from west to east, from Londonderry to New Garden. So I'll just kind of give you a highlight of some of the other segments. So in terms of segment 1, there are quite a few PennDOT improvements. The roundabout project at Route 926, as well as the roundabout at 841 in Chatham, and the roundabouts at the interchange, which is kind of right on the line of the segment. So given the existing kind of road configuration around those roundabout projects, the spacing of the intersections, some alternative routes that line up with some of the key intersections we're focusing on, we don't want to go too far ahead in making recommendations in terms of capacity. We've identified some safety improvements that can be done at each of the intersections in the short term, but what we're really recommending is approach where the municipalities take maybe a pause and let the PennDOT roundabout improvements in those projects come online, see what it really does for shifting the traffic patterns, because they may draw some of the traffic, for example, that maybe want to turn left out of northbound 796 to head towards Route 10. That's safety concern of an intersection, unsignalized, coming down a grade, but it's an easy trip. Just go out to Route 926 at the roundabout and make a left and head to the west. So, without putting prescribing some improvements that would be costly to the township and PennDOT potentially, we really want to kind of see what effect the roundabouts have on those intersections. So again, we have some safety improvements short term, but as those projects are completed and traffic shifts, the townships can go back and look at those intersections, see what's needed in terms of capacity. Do they need a traffic signal, or is another roundabout warranted along the corridor? So that's our approach in segment 1. If you go to segment 2, the next slide, Chris. So again, the Route 1 interchange is on the left side of the page. In here, there is development proposed on the top of the page. It is a multi-use development, residential, some commercial, and potentially some public use. In that development, there's also a residential multifamily that is proposed alongside the shopping center between Hepburn Road and Route 1. So that's going to add some demands to the intersection there, the first signalized access at the shopping center. And what we've seen in the traffic impact studies, we did review those. That intersection will work under normal conditions, but queues are getting tight. So, there's the potential that there might be some capacity that's needed, additional lanes coming from the Route 1 interchange south towards Old Baltimore Pike. So we're recommending that be monitored and considered and planned for the future if it's needed. As part of the development on the top of the page, you can see we're recommending it's being required, I should say, that at Glen Willow Road, there's going to be a center left turn lane added to Route 41. So we are kind of recommending that ultimately be continued down towards the borough once you hit Avondale. And then it'll transition route, go to the next slide. In Avondale, we are looking for, to really preserve the character of Avondale. At one point, one of the plans, I think it was the SAVE document, had recommended using Pomeroy as a vehicular bypass route. Kind of over time, that does not appear to be a viable solution for vehicular traffic, but we are recommending it to be considered and further evaluated for like a pedestrian bike boulevard that would, take non-vehicular traffic away from and off of the busy Route 41 corridor, though we are recommending some enhanced pedestrian crossings at 3rd and 5th Streets, where that would really be a safe and clearly marked pedestrian crossing to get folks across Route 41. Right now, it's Route 41 is a little bit, or I'm sorry, Avondale is a little bit more walkable, but Route 41 really seems to be a barrier to get to both sides of the borough. So we are recommending that, and then we are acknowledging PennDOT's efforts at State Street and the bridge improvements, and then some gateway treatments on both ends as well of the corridor. And then we get into segment 4, which is basically our intersections in New Garden Township. We are recommending which is consistent with some other planning documents for New Garden, but really to provide a center left turn lane, access management, some key safety improvements, some sight line improvements at the New Garden intersection, for example. At Newark Road, that intersection has been improved with some turn lanes. So we are recommending really that we monitor those conditions. We'll be taking a closer look at those through the Act 209. We'll be actually taking a closer look at all these intersections, as I noted, with the Act 209 study. But we really realize that New Garden Township wants to really see commercial development along Route 41 as opposed to spread out in other areas of the township. So we want to make sure that the improvements that we recommend in that study can accommodate that traffic. And we are recommending some streetscape improvements, as I mentioned, some gateway as well as some turn lane improvements. If a center left turn lane is not provided throughout the corridor, that maybe it just picks up south of Newark Road, or it's phased over time, that if there's a key intersection, that we can provide that left turn lane before the whole corridor is done. So that's a high summary level of the New Garden improvements, as well as the improvements on the corridor. Go to the next slide, Chris. So in the report, I'm not going to go through the next few slides in detail, but the report will have a section that we call toolboxes. So it'll be a various examples of some of the vision or a vision of kind of what we're recommending throughout the corridor that can be applied at different intersections or sections of the corridor. So we have traffic calming, bike and pedestrian features. Skip ahead, Chris. On-road bicycle features. The next slide has some streetscape and visual aesthetic enhancements on the next slide. And then sorry, my screen got messed up. And then on the last slide, we have some access management practices, and again, some more bike and ped facilities. And then we're also going to add some safety countermeasures, as well as some green infrastructure recommendations that can be applied. Those will probably be more specific to Avondale Borough, but as all the adjacent municipalities have the potential to contribute to the stormwater in Avondale, some of those practices might be picked up by the other municipalities as well. So those will be more spelled out in the actual report. And then just in terms of next steps, we are wrapping up the draft report. We expect to have that report done by the end of the month. We did have a PennDOT coordination meeting with folks, a few of the project managers over at PennDOT today. We went through these recommendations. We got some feedback. We'll incorporate that into the report as well. And then we will get a copy of the draft report out to the municipalities and work on making any adjustments we need to finalize the report and have the 4 municipalities accept the final report. Hopefully, probably in a timeline of September, maybe at the October board meetings. But that's where that's our target, and I guess that's the end of the presentation. So if anybody has any questions, Brian and I'd be happy to answer them.
I'll start with the board.
Any questions from the board?
Yes. So in looking at the plans specific to New Garden Township, the southern end of the township where the White Clay Point development is, those plans are relatively very old. In my opinion, that is certainly a moving target. And we should reevaluate those. Everything north of Avondale Borough, you have roundabouts. Along with the area in London Grove Township where their shopping district is, you have center turn lanes. I'm going to go out on a limb because I've only lived here all my life and I drive for a living. From New Garden Township line at Kennett Township to the borough of Avondale, we have more access points than London Grove and potentially half of Londonderry. A center turn lane would obviously keep traffic moving as well as save lives, period. I do understand the benefit to the roundabouts. You keep the traffic moving. And again, if I were able to come from the Delaware line and go to my destination, which may be Gap on 41, and I didn't have to stop at a stop sign and I could do 35 miles an hour, a stop sign or a red light, I would get to my destination a lot faster. So the roundabouts that are being constructed on the Route 1 bypass, Chatham, as well as the 926 are going to, number one, improve safety as well as prevent backups. Food for thought.
No, I totally agree with you. Center left turn lane is something that we are recommending for New Garden, as well as some other access management techniques that could be applied. They're often a little bit more tricky to implement, but we're going to offer them, they're a little bit easier when properties redevelop, rather than approaching existing property owners, but, it's been done in the past. And, in terms of, the key study intersections in New Garden Township, yeah, we are definitely taking a closer look at them. We're trying to not recommend signal versus roundabout. Although, as you mentioned, the kind of Londonderry and London Grove have more roundabouts. New Garden, they there are some existing traffic signals there, and they've been proposed with the new development. So, it's not set in stone yet. It's something when we do the Act 2 and 9 study, we will look at both roundabout and signalized improvements or signalized improvements, capacity improvements to existing signalized intersections. So we'll be taking a closer look at that as well. But if the township's open to more roundabouts on the southern end of the corridor, that's good to know as well.
Okay, and thank you for the report. I think that, work in progress, and I just hope we can get a bridge in Avondale before it falls into the white clay. That's a cheap shot at PennDOT, but that's me.
Well, just some feedback we got today was, yes, that is a priority for them. They are working with the borough. So hopefully, hopefully they can get something, agreed upon and, I guess, get some boots on the ground and get that implemented soon.
Yeah, because of the detour, we have wide loads detoured via Route 1 bypass to Newark Road. Again, driving for a living, and you meet a 14-foot wide load on any section of Newark Road, somebody has to stop, back up, or get off of the road to let that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And why they would detour wide loads to that route just totally baffles my mind when it's a prohibited road for anything longer than 45 feet because of the vertical and horizontal alignments.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the public? You want to come up to the microphone so the speaker can hear you? Okay.
I live in Somerset Lake. We use Sunnydale Road, which now has, for quite a few years, we've had a church and a middle school. And if you turn right, to safely make a left-hand turn onto northbound 41, you have to go over Egypt Run Road and turn right on Newark Road to go out to the traffic light. I would love to see a traffic light at Sunnydale Road at 41 so that people can turn left and a turning lane so people could still turn right to go south. That would be a huge improvement. And the other thing I'd like to say is I agree that the intersection of Newark Road and 41 has been improved, but there is no turning arrow for the turning a lane to go toward Tough Kenneman. There is no arrow, so you're stuck until someone is nice enough to let you go, or miracle, there's no traffic coming north. And the arrow from Newark Road to turn south on 41 lasts 2 cars. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just respond to that. In terms of the Sunnydale Road intersection, we are looking at capacity safety improvement there. We are looking at the we will be looking at traffic signal warrants to make sure that PennDOT would approve a traffic signal there. And if they will, that will be a future recommendation. If they won't, then we'll have to, look at some alternatives, but we are definitely going to review the data and make sure that, if a signal is warranted, that it is proposed, or potentially a roundabout as well. And then in terms of the Route 41 and Newark Road, we will look at the traffic counts, and we will be reevaluating the traffic signal phasing. What additional advanced left turn phases might be warranted. In terms of the timing, I would say that we can take a look at that. We'll talk to Chris offline. I'll take a closer look at what the existing phasing is, and if that's something we can address sooner rather than later, we'll try to work with PennDOT to do that.
I have another question. I'm the husband of my wife. When this work begins in the New Garden Township perimeter,
I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble hearing.
okay. When this work actually begins in the New Garden Township, who's going to be paying for the work in New Garden Township? Is it the property owners, or how is this going to be paid for?
Well, the report's going to have a implementation section, and it'll clearly kind of spell out, what we envision, how the projects would be constructed, who would be responsible for it. In New Garden Township, it's going to be a combination of a lot of methods. The township is starting a traffic impact fee process where they will collect fees from new developments to help fund these projects. What a lot of municipalities do with those collected traffic impact fees is use that as leverage or a financial match with a PennDOT grant. So they'll pay for maybe 20% of the project, and PennDOT will, if they select the project, they'll fund the remaining portions of the project, or I should say, PennDOT will fund 80% of the project, and the township will do the remaining 20%, any kind of overages that might happen on the project. So that's one mechanism. We can work depending on the project to try to get various projects on the tip. But these plans, I don't foresee the township raising taxes to fund these improvements. It's going to be through partnerships with PennDOT and new development, which would probably be the primary mechanisms.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? We just have a question real quick from or,
I can pull this off the chat real quick.
okay, yeah.
And John, we have one chat question from
Sure.
Mr. Larry Campbell, just asked to address the double roundabouts issue at the Route 741 intersection, if you could.
Yeah, so the roundabouts at the Route 7 interchange, those were, I believe, recommended in the SAVE report. It's rather old, so for the purposes of our graphic, we showed the roundabout, but as we move forward with the Act 2 and ION study, we're going to take a fresh look at those recommendations and see if maybe some other configuration might be preferred. It could be a traffic signal with turn lanes. We know right now it doesn't work, it doesn't function as it should, but we will identify some improvements down there, whether it be a roundabout or some kind of more traditional signal with turn lanes.
Okay. If you have a question, if you want to just come to the microphone, please.
Good evening. I'd like to thank you for bringing this presentation. Question, and it's probably not a long-term question, but a short-term question. The intersection at 41 and Sharp Road is very poorly lit. So if you're southbound on 41 making a left-hand turn, aside from the fact that it's a strange intersection because of the way the roads are configured, it's really, really dark at night. And when you have the oncoming glare, you can barely see where to make your turn in an area where there's a lot of crashes and higher speeds. It'd be great to see an early improvement on that lighting, to just improve the lighting so people can see that intersection a little better. Because the sign is off to the right, deep right side, and you just have no idea sometimes where to make your turn if you're facing traffic. So if that could be looked at in the short term, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Kroll?
John, Richard Gaw, Chester County Press. Very nice presentation, very informative. I have a few questions for you, John. Did PennDOT in your meeting today or at any time recently give you any anticipated dates for shovel in the ground for these projects that you just discussed?
No, sorry, we didn't discuss specific dates on the PennDOT projects. We were kind of reviewing maybe some of the other projects a little bit more detail, since those were pretty much kind of moving forward. So I don't have specific dates on there. I think the Route 41, their Route 41 website is pretty up to date. So whatever's on there is probably the most current as kind of it's been, I don't know, ready for the public. Probably not the best choice of words. It's, what they're what everybody's agreed to internally, and the schedule they have. Whether they're discussing changes to that, it just hasn't been finalized yet. So I would refer to that website.
Sure, thank you. The next question is, Steve Alaban just recommended and advocated for center left turn lanes, particularly in corridor 4, which is where we are now, which leads the question, in your estimation, and you're an expert in this, what are the advantages and disadvantages of having a roundabout anywhere, particularly along the Route 41 corridor and particularly in this fourth exchange, if you will, part of that corridor? Where do we see the advantages of having a roundabout, and what could potentially be a disadvantage of having roundabouts, particularly, as I said, in this fourth quarter?
All right. So hold on one second. My dog is going nuts. One of the disadvantages of presenting from home, but
he's left. He's gone away.
sorry about that. Just
No
wanted to
problem.
shut
Thank
the
you.
door. So your question was, what are the advantages and disadvantages of the roundabout?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So-
certainly in your business, you have seen advantages and you've seen some disadvantages specific to this particular corridor. Ideally speaking, to moving toward the Route 7 corridor, what are the advantages and disadvantages? What do you see?
Yeah. So the roundabout, there are some good videos on the PennDOT website about the benefits of roundabouts. They kind of walk you through it, and what you really see with a roundabout is that helps reduce conflicts within an intersection. So a lot of accidents that happen at traditional signalized or stop controlled intersections are angle accidents, left turns conflicting. Usually, if it's a signalized intersection, if somebody doesn't pay attention to the light, they are high speed collisions. I unfortunately was just in one of those when somebody turned in front of me when I was going down the main road. So what the roundabout will do is they will slow those vehicles down. And basically you have if there is going to be a collision, it's, at a lower speed, lower impact, and you basically reduce the number of conflicts. So you're only looking in one direction. You're only going to have a car from one direction. So you're not getting the cross traffic from both directions, or the other approach angle if it's a four-leg intersection. So that helps reduce fatalities and costly impact or costly crashes. And in terms of capacity, it handles and as you mentioned, it allows traffic to move, continue moving, whereas you kind of yield when you get to the intersection. So the disadvantage is it takes more right away, and sometimes you need, sometimes it can't be a one-lane roundabout. Sometimes you need outer additional lanes, or like a two-lane roundabout around the whole roundabout, or a portion of the roundabout, which requires more land. But those are kind of the key advantages and disadvantages of the roundabout. If you're designing for trucks, which Route 41 has, heavy truck volumes, you have to be careful designing for those and make sure you have the proper radius. If you don't have high truck traffic, you can often get away with a slightly smaller roundabout, but along Route 41 you would need a larger radius for the truck turning movements.
And if you can indulge me, I have one last question, and I thank you for your answers. What previous PennDOT projects have incorporated Bowman's recommendations? Seems like you've got a good relationship with PennDOT. What have you worked with them on before? Where have we seen your recommendations in projects that involve PennDOT?
Sure. I can, let's see, I'm trying to move down into your area. I'm not as familiar with implemented projects down there. Coming north in Chester County, they're in Euclid Township, just north of the Turnpike interchange at Downingtown. Graphite Mine Road was recently completed. Well, I shouldn't say recently, a few years back, which is kind of a bypass around the old Eagle Village, and the improvements through there. We've done some improvements down along Route 30 near Main Street at Exton. Route 252 near the Route 1 interchange, just up Route 1. There were some capacity safety improvements in around the Route 1 interchange. I don't know. There's so many, I'm drawing a blank.
Suffice it to say there's several.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've been
great.
pretty busy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your assistance.
Thanks.
Okay, anyone else before we move on? Yeah, if you want to just come up to the.
I was just hoping to request access to this presentation, maybe through the website.
Yeah, everything is recorded and put on the website. And then, yeah, I think it's already on the.
It's already been
it's on the
updated and
agenda for the
available in
slide
the
at
agenda.
least, and then you can review.
Great. Thank you very much.
Recording. Yeah, thank you. Okay, all right. Thank you very much for your time, John. Presentation.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, next up, we have a presentation by the Avondale Fire Company for the Q2 update.
Go ahead and go to the next one, Chris. All right. So you can see here our second quarter, we're at that's 4 motor vehicle accidents, 5 automatic alarms in April. This is just the top numbers that we've had in New Garden Township. Total calls in New Garden Township is 134 for the second quarter. Last year we did 330 to date. We'll go to the next slide if there's no questions to that. So there's the yearly report there. Like you say, you got 134 to date today, or for the second quarter, 330 last year, 290 2022, and 328 in 2021. Yep. Okay, this slide here, what this indicates is for EMS responses for the second quarter. The green line is actually the dispatch calls just for the second quarter. That's for everybody. The red line is actually 278 was dispatches for New Garden Township, and 265 were actually transport calls out of New Garden Township. Next. Okay, you can see our budget here. If you look at the actual income versus expenses, we're a little over. We're still fine. Everything's good. I think what you're going to find is that we had 2 PEMA grants that we have to put the money out for. Once we get the canceled checks back, we'll get reimbursed from PEMA. But you have to purchase the stuff first and then get reimbursed. I will reassure you next quarter that will look a heck of a lot better. The phase 2 ambulance remount was $181.68. What we did is we sent our 2015 ambulance out and had the chassis removed, back the new chassis under it. Actually, it just got back today from getting the radios put on it. It's sitting at the firehouse. Total cost of that's probably going to be right around $200,000. But when the salesman brought it to the firehouse, I asked him for a demo ambulance, which you guys helped purchase a few years back. I believe the number was $318. That same ambulance today is $460. And that's and it's going to be 2.5 to 3 years out. So basically they went over our box, checked the electric, did some upholstery repair in the back. It's basically, we have a brand new ambulance for like I say, $200,000. Some stuff I just got fresh off the press before I got here. Sorry I didn't send it to you, Chris. For the second quarter, we have 664 training hours, 600 meeting hours. This is for the volunteers. 496 miscellaneous hours. What's the miscellaneous hours? It could be the trustees working on the building. We're starting to keep track of all the stuff that they do. It could be somebody taking a truck to 10-8 to get serviced. It could be a miscellaneous of anything. Duty crews, we have 3,440 hours. And call hours, we have 2,135. So for the grand total for the first 6 months of the year, if you add everything up from January 1 till end of June, there's 20,066 hours of volunteer hours. Bowling Green in the last couple months has gotten a little better, but we're 5 calls deep already today. So it's starting to go back up. So, but that's about where we're at. Any questions, concerns?
Any questions from the board? Yep. Any questions from the public?
Thank you for your report.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Thank you for your presentation. Okay, next is Scarpta.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lieutenant Joe Versaglia with Southern Chester County Regional Police Department. Going to go over some Q2 numbers here for you. Probably breeze through these. So obviously, I'll be going New Garden specific. With our Part 1 crimes, which tend to be your more serious crimes, obviously, we had a total of 7 in this quarter, 15 year to date, 6 thefts, 1 auto theft. Oh, yeah. Part 2 crimes, again, these are more quality of life issues, things of that nature. 33 for Q2, 70 year to date. We can roll, Chris. These are total calls for service. These do not include self-initiated activities such as traffic stops. So total calls for service, 585 this quarter with 1,195 year to date. Obviously assists, miscellaneous calls, disturbances, traffic-related issues are typically our highest with regard to numbers there. Yeah, Chris. These are going to be traffic citations. For 2024, this quarter are at 357. That is up 102 citations since 2023. Warnings are up 129 from 2023 to 2024. This has a lot to do with our staffing just being back up to where it needs to be, and implementation of our traffic safety unit, which are the guys that are just out there, handling trucks and taking care of, any sort of traffic complaints we might get, that they're out there fielding those. So that has a lot to do with those large increases. And 10 DUI arrests as compared to 14 at this time last year. That's a national trend. Has a lot to do with it's going down, which is a good thing. It has a lot to do with rideshare, Lyft, Uber, things of that nature. People are just starting to make better decisions. Yeah, we can go, Chris. Thank you. Traffic crashes, 61 this quarter, 115 year to date. Reportable, which means that either someone was injured and required transport to the hospital, or a vehicle was unable to be driven from the scene. Non-reportable, typically a fender bender, a little less serious. 1 hit and run, and 1 unfounded. Unfounded sounds weird, but sometimes people will call in a crash, and by the time we get there, they've exchanged information and left or something. So sometimes that's what that unfounded category would be. Sorry. This just shows the biggest percentages, but this is actually going to be for our entire coverage area. So that's why it's not going to be, it's not just going to be, New Garden specific. Obviously, you can see there the largest percentage of things we handle is usually traffic stops, phone assignments. People just call, have a question or something like that. And then reports, that could be anything, and usually get kicked up to whatever the person called in for originally. So if someone calls in to report something and it ends up being a theft or something, it would get kicked into a different category. There, Chris. New Garden Township had 1,500 total events. Now, an event does consider things that are self-initiated, traffic stops and things like that. So that's why you'll see that number was higher than the actual calls for service that were handled. That might be just about it there. Just a few things outside of the quarterly report there. First off, our newest hire, Eric Karaska, he is successfully completed his field training. He's in normal rotation now, so we are back up to the staffing we wanted to be at. We have purchased 3 new Tahoes. They're currently getting outfitted now, so hopefully within the next several months, you should be seeing those out. When you see your guys out there now, they're going to be in new uniforms. We've rebranded, so you'll see the new uniforms and the new patches. The chief and I also have whites for more formal events or something like that, but we'd be in the dark gray as well. The dark gray as well. Black pants with the dark gray and oyster piping. The shirts are going to be dark gray as well. Very unique. I believe New Mexico is the only other agency that has this color uniform. So other than that, National Night Out will be August 6th. The 2 locations for that are going to be Pomeroy Ave in Avondale and Rose Hill. Rose Hill Ave and West Grove Town Square. It starts at 6 o'clock. Unfortunately, there is no rain date, so if it does rain, then it's the whole event's canceled. But come on out, bring the family, food, pony rides for the kids, and bounce houses, and a lot of neat stuff, and a lot of community interaction. So, unless anybody has any questions, that's all I got for you.
Any question? Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it. Nope. Mr. Andrew, you want to?
The climate today where violence can happen at any time, at any gathering.
Yes, sir.
I just want, I haven't been to a meeting in a while, but just wondering if at every supervisor meeting, where there's an armed policeman who can react to any kind of violent act that might be directed against the supervisors or anybody in the audience.
We typically have an officer that'll come by. We have usually the on-call, the on-duty shift sergeant will come on up and kind of gauge the climate. If it seems like a peaceful event like this, where there's not any certain turmoil or anything going on in the township, where people might be a little more hostile or a little more agitated, they'll hang out for just long enough to ensure that that's the case. But if for whatever reason there ever was an issue, I mean, our response time is relatively impressive, so we can usually get here fairly quick should there be an issue.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. We don't have any unfinished business. So moving on to new business, we have a zoning hearing board application for 209 Evergreen Court.
So in your packet was my memo to Chris. It's a front lot line for Jim Rand, who's in the audience, if we have any questions. But it's pretty simple. It's a 50-foot setback by the ordinance, and he's seeking a 35.5-foot for a garage. And the reason for that relief is just due to the terrain of his property. So it's rather difficult to put it in it where, within the setbacks. So if there's any questions on it, otherwise I would just suggest that the board takes no action and it goes on to the zoning hearing process.
Okay. Yeah, I know Christy will have to make her usual recusal.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions?
Real quick, this is strictly a dimensional variance. There's no use variance required.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be an accessory to the dwelling.
I'll make a motion that we take no position on the application.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? Nope. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
And I'm
And
recused.
recusal from Christy. Okay. Next up, we have resolution 24-011 regarding Purolite.
Yes, Purelight received approval on July 17th, 2023 by Resolution 882. This is one of several resolutions extending the time to secure a financial guarantee. This resolution extends it by an additional 180 days from today's date.
That seems pretty simple. Any more questions? Nope, we have a motion to approve the resolution.
I'll make a motion that we approve resolution 24-011 reference to the Pure Light property.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, any further discussion? Nope. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Nope. Okay. All right, then we have resolution 24-012 regarding Kaolin.
Kaolin Star Road received approval for the development project, excuse me, on May 15th, 2023 by resolution number 881 and has received several extensions by other resolutions previously. This resolution extends the time for them to secure a financial guarantee by an additional 180 days, specifically until January 11th, 2025.
All right, do you have a motion to approve?
Quick question. We're okay on the road improvements that they've committed to? This won't affect the road improvements they've committed to,
It-
correct?
It just gives them more time to come up with the financial security so the plans can get recorded.
Okay.
But I think their counsel's here if you have any question.
He's hiding.
No,
Right.
everything is, the plan is the
Okay.
same. They just haven't put up the
So-
financial security.
Simple extension. I'll make a motion that we adopt resolution 24-012.
Seconded.
Okay, any other further discussion? Yep. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Yep. All right, thank you. All right, moving on to 510 Newark Road.
So this one is a historic resource property. The owner, Jim McGee, which is here, and his builder, Bob McCumsey. So the process in the ordinance for historic resource, it kind of is outlined in the memorandum that was provided. So the applicant had to submit a zoning application, went in front of the Historic Commission. Historic Commission reviewed it, which they were very familiar with the project, and believed it was, one of the oldest historic buildings in New Garden Township. But we went through the process. They showed the applicant showed his hardship. The school owns the property, but he's under contract to buy it. The intention of the applicant is to demo the house, which is in disrepair, and then fix up the barn that's there. So, an improvement, soon to be done. So the final phase or the final step in the process from the ordinance is the board review. You've got the Historic Commission's determination. So we just need a final vote from the board on it. I think the ordinance is pretty specific on the demolition of it, that if you to issue the permit.
Right, we don't have any option in this instance.
You can
Yeah.
ask your legal counsel, but my interpretation, I would agree.
Oh,
I believe they use the word must, and then just,
Shall.
just stop.
Shall.
They've been through they went through all of the steps necessary.
Question on the barn. Is that a use by right for the barn? The intended use? Or would that need zoning relief?
No, I would say it doesn't, because it would be a non-conforming and.
You want to share your plans, Mr. McKean?
Your-
Yeah.
What's your intention with the barn?
So I'm curious of the barn and what the intention is, the renovations. Are you going to keep the barn in the historic state from the exterior?
We're going to try to rehabilitate it as best as can and make sure that it looks nice. It'll be principally recreation, the use of the barn. There won't be any livestock or any animals in there. What we intend to beautify that and make sure that it looks really nice.
So it will not be used as a residence.
That's not the intention, no.
So that's in what district, Robert?
It's in R1, which
Which
to
would
answer
need
your question,
a use
you would
variance.
almost have to go for a use variance.
Correct.
So what's the plan with the barn then? It's going to be like a wedding destination? What's it
No,
going
it
to be?
won't even be for a business. It'll just be
Oh,
for
okay.
a private recreation for my family. And ultimately, once the house is demolished, then likely build a house where that house was.
Oh, okay.
So we would just keep the grounds as they were.
All right.
Mhm.
So it wouldn't be open to the public or anything?
That's not the intention.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would that still need a
Yes.
even,
You still need a use variance because it's in the R1.
so you can't just
Only
build
thing you could
something
do-
to
Only
you-
thing you could do with it is to make it a residence or have a residence already there to be an accessory to the dwelling unit.
right? But I mean, like if it's, like you said, if it's just for his family's use, he still needs a variance for that?
Yes.
Oh,
I would
okay.
say, well, I can double check with Winnie offline, but
Yeah.
preliminary, that's what I would say.
think it sounds right to me.
Okay.
Okay. On the issue of the demolition permit, I think we are at the time frame where we need to take action, and I will make the motion that we issue the permit for the demolition of the house, regrettably.
I'll second it.
Any other discussion? Nope. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Avondale Fire Company and EMS appropriation for the second quarter, or third quarter, I'm sorry.
This is just installment number 3 of the appropriations for the fiscal year, pretty much cut and dry based off of the quarterly appropriation schedule that we have for both Avondale Fire Company, Avondale EMS, and Southern Chester County EMS. So you'll find this eerily similar to the Q2 appropriation, if you have any questions.
Do we have a big check?
Excuse me?
Do we have a big check?
We can get a big check.
Okay, all right.
But the motion is in the staff recommendation report for.
Okay, I'll make the motion that we pay Avondale Fire Company, Southern Chester County EMS, and the fire companies, that would also mean the ambulance as well.
All 3 entities.
Okay, in the amount of $246,187.50.
Okay, we have a second?
Seconded.
All right, any other further discussion? Nope. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Okay, East Parallel Taxiway.
Good evening again. This time on the East Parallel Taxiway, as you know, over the last several weeks, we've been advertising a bid for the reconstruction of our East Parallel Taxiway out at the airport. This section of pavement, Chris, I don't know if you have that up on the board, but the section of pavement is probably one of the worst condition pavement, oldest pavement sections at the airport. It is presenting a major safety issue for taxiing aircraft. With that said, working with Trans Systems, our engineer, Pennsylvania Bureau of Aviation, and the FAA, we were able to secure a grant for funding to rehab the entire area, mainly in this red outlined area up on the screen. The FAA did ask if we could break this into 3 parts depending upon how the bid showed up to be able to fund it via grant. And they are planning on awarding us for the base bid, which consists of the first section to tie into our existing taxiway. And right here, this is our new parallel taxiway that was finished in 2013. This new taxiway will tie into that and will standardize this whole area through here to meet current Group 2 standards of aircraft, which is wingspan 49 feet and below. And then we'll also reconfigure the entrance to the approach end of runway 24 into a standard area. Right now, the threshold, the hold short marker right here, if you're an aircraft, your back is actually towards the aircraft landing on final, so there is not good visibility. So the new plan is to bring this taxiway up 6 feet and also out on a 45 or on a 90-degree angle from the actual runway. So we opened up bids last week during our Future Aviators summer camp. That was not a camp activity though. The bids, we had 2 bidders. The low bidder was DeRocco Brothers. And for the base bid, the number that they had was $653,434. The ad alternate 1 was $868,087.50. Engineering for Trans Systems, $144,634. Administration fee, $5,000. The FAA and the Bureau of Aviation are prepared to award us with a contract, or I'm sorry, with a grant to cover the base bid plus the ad alternate aspect of this. What was not awarded is the relocation of our fuel farm. There's an environmental study that has to be done for that, and the time that's necessary to get that study completed would be outside the window of the funding availability for the FAA. So I'm here tonight to request to the board that the Board of Supervisors award the bid to Duraco Brothers for the amount not to exceed $1,671,155.50. That will include $83,559.50 of a local share. So that's the cost to the airport. Those funds will come out of the airport fund. So for $1.67 million, it's costing us $83,000. And that is for the East Parallel Taxiway Reconstruction Project.
Sounds like a pretty good deal.
I'll make a motion that we award the bid with a not to exceed. I'll make a motion that we award the bid with a not to exceed $1.671 million and $155.50. And that would be awarded to Duraco Brothers.
Okay, we have a
I'll
second.
second the motion.
Okay, any further discussion? No?
No,
All in
good job.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
And then, John, I have a question on the fuel farm. Are we going to evaluate that and try to get grants for that in the near future?
That'll be a state local grant. And
Okay.
on our Bureau of Aviation. And really what that includes is just the relocation of the pump head and the reels, not the underground storage, but we are working on that as well to bring those tanks above ground and be able to get that available.
Right. And new pumps, new dispensing pumps, probably.
It's just for pumps from the 70s.
1971.
They're retro.
They are.
Yes.
Right, Mr. Gall?
Thank you. You can eat it. Years. No, if he can get Kenny, we were relevant.
Airport capital. So 90% of that is the FAA, 5% is state Bureau of Aviation funding. So to be exact, $1,504,039 is the FAA share. 83,557 is the state share, and then ours is 83,559. Yep, thank you. Sure. Thank you all.
And all of these numbers are in our agenda packet for future reference.
Okay, then last we have the traffic signal technical specifications.
So this is resolution number 2024-13. A technical specifications for traffic control signalization document was prepared by Bowman Consulting Group LD, which is to provide for a standardization of traffic signal equipment and to reduce long-term maintenance costs for roads in New Garden Township. So Bowman prepared this document with those specifications. This resolution has the township officially adopt it as the township regulations for those purposes, and it's effective immediately.
Okay.
So this was part of a recognized initiative and the ongoing kind of monthly traffic safety committee sessions, although I think this one we touched about last year and it kind of slowly materialized over time from a scope of work. It was into an actual document, and then the document required essentially at this point a corroboration with the solicitor to understand that it needed to be adopted by resolution. But think of this as a specifications manual in lieu of like a saldo provision for all development, everything kind of coming in. So if someone has to build something, it has to be in accordance with this manual. So you see standardization across the board, and that's mostly from a purchasing standpoint. So we service traffic signals in the township. You order one type of series of parts rather than a myriad of different series of parts. So it really helps out with the collective purchasing and labor for that matter. So that's kind of the reason for the standardization. And this will have to be something that eventually over time, we will start folding in the same signals over and over again, but we can't enforce that technically without a document that's been formally adopted by the township. And then this, of course, be something that we look at to fold into our saldo document when we do proceed forward with the zoning and zoning and saldo scope of works in the next few years.
Right.
So good times, traffic signals.
Yeah, right.
You ready for a motion?
Yep.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we adopt resolution 24-013 in reference to traffic signalization manual.
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion? Nope. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Nope. All right. All right, time for managers' reports.
Everyone always leaves before the good stuff comes up. All right. So good evening, members of the board. Chris Himes, Township Manager. I'll be going over what I would consider to be a pretty significant change in plans when it comes to our kind of in-year capital projects, and then of course how this impacts future capital budgeting for initiatives in the future, and then ultimately what that means for the required amount of revenues to enact those projects. And so this was essentially materialized from updates from our engineering team at Pannoni, and so that's kind of catalyzed the start to finish of everything. So this has been over the course of the last few weeks subject to significant review by staff. And of course my thing doesn't work here. There you go. So the overview is kind of just what I stated. And so this will have to have a plan to leverage multiple revenue sources, primarily our capital fund, cash fund balance, ARPA, which is the American Rescue Plan Act, which is, of course, running to a halt here at the end of this fiscal year. And of course, our own generated interest income from not only our several fund balances, but of course, the sewer fund that we've discussed pretty ad nauseum. So the projects that we're talking about specifically that kind of gave this review was the on-scheduled Mercer Mill Road project, which is the culvert kind of situation where it's kind of cantered kind of out of the alignment of the actual roadway. And so it creates that kind of sheeting rain flow kind of going out and above and around and through and kind of everywhere on the road there into the kind of across the street property, neighboring property, into their stream basin. And of course, it jets into a place where it caused significant erosion, all of which was highlighted during the significant storm events back to back a few years ago. So that kind of put it on our radar that this is something needing some analysis and of course some corrections as well. So with that, that was also one that was previously scoped by our prior engineer, who was mostly specifically looking at stormwater projects at Cedarville, and of course corroborated with Pannoni Engineering, which is the township's now standardized engineer for all projects outside of just transportation traffic initiatives. We then have the Wilkinson Drive culvert, which is, of course, in the southwestern side of the township. That's one where there was another Cedarville proposal estimate that kind of gave us that scope of work. And that's the one, if you remember, it just kind of has a general sense of flooding and pooling just based off the fact that all of the retention areas on either side of the culvert area are just in need of some pretty significant repairs, mostly kind of cleaning and regrading, as well as the actual cleaning out of the culvert in and of itself. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach there. And then, of course, the Public Works Fuel Farm replacement project that we have scoped out there. This is one where it's essentially just a replacement of existing infrastructure that's mostly all kind of like mid-early 90s phased in fiberglass tanks and switches and mechanisms that are long since obsolete. So long story short, it doesn't really work anymore. And that's an issue because we supply kind of co-stars bulk purchasing of gas and diesel supplies for not only township vehicles at the Public Works Department, but also, and we had to kind of offline some of the policing support for it, but also the fire companies. So we service all of our primary first responders who can't necessarily fully rely on gas stations to get gas during fueling ops during emergency situations and stuff. So this is kind of a self-sufficiency. Plus, it actually cheapens the rate of gas purchasing for the township. So it's a good solution. So with that, this was the original understanding of the assignment. Total cost of $545,000, of which we had kind of half of that to knock it back with the remaining use of ARPA funding that was discussed last year. And then the final cost of the township would be kind of a blended use of interest and cash to supplement the final projects there. That is no longer the case. The new updated cost is $1.2 million, which is higher than 545, so it's almost near tripled. And that's one where the use of ARPA fundings doesn't necessarily have the full net burden reduced. So right now we're looking at a net obligation of 990. So basically almost $1 million in total to get these projects across the finish line. So it's almost a 3 times higher impact. And when I talk about 3 times higher impact, we're talking about final cost to the township. So with that, I kind of just briefly described some of the elements of each project, but some of the reasons for the increases, which I think is justified for this conversation, is essentially the actual Mercer Mill Road one didn't actually increase by much, which is surprising. But all in all, it's based on the fact that you need to do a combined DEP joint permit, which adds a significant amount of soft cost. And then some of the repairs and estimates in terms of what was needed to kind of align the culvert, it kind of fleshed out to be somewhat near the same. So the good news is this is one where we're kind of on scope with what we originally forecasted. But the problem with this one is requires a significant amount of process to get the joint permitting complete. And that's just when you start kind of off, off-ramping these projects into DEP matters, you get into a very extensive approval and review process for this project. So that's kind of what the big ticket is for this one. But all in all, it kind of stays the same. So the Wilkinson Drive one, this is the one that almost pretty much quadrupled, if you will. So with that, it's basically about what was proposed in the original recommendation. It didn't necessarily do much, and it actually didn't solve the problem. That was scoped by Cedarville. This one is now being scoped fully by Pannoni, and it's essentially an apples to oranges type comparison of the 2 types of projects. But essentially what you're talking about is all this area down here kind of much further to the one side, and then on the other side as well, you're talking about more of a scooping and actual like clearing out and actually doing like more of a stormwater process rather than just a very simplistic kind of go in, you kind of clean it out, kind of restore, repair, and kind of a light touch type approach. And so that's one where you're talking about the impact of what you're doing. If you're going to be doing kind of the original Cedarville one, you're not really necessarily fixing the issue. So it was kind of more of a cosmetic touch, if you will. But this is the cost reality of doing sizable culvert / stormwater repairs on areas of need in the township. You can always kind of come up with a kind of a 2-pronged approach. One, does it need kind of significant stormwater mitigation procedures? 2, is the culvert in good shape and does the culvert need to be replaced? Luckily, the culvert does actually not need to be replaced on this one. Otherwise, it would actually be much, much higher.
That's an old picture, Ken?
Sorry?
Is that an old picture?
It was from last year.
Yeah.
And you've been cleaning that out.
We cleaned it out several times.
Yeah. So that's kind of the current approach is just staff goes in there and they kind of just, and then it just fills back up again. So.
We're hoping we don't know yet because as you
Yeah.
it's just about completely filled, but that's the perfect candidate for the snap plates. We
Yeah.
can replace that in-house, basically in an afternoon.
Yeah.
Sort of like
That's that like sleeve type mechanism that kind of goes in and kind of just almost like rubber like outfits the inside of it. So it just, if you have a culvert that's kind of a corrugated metal pipe, which this definitely is, it's likely to have kind of like a Swiss cheese kind of component to the middle of it. This would just kind of cover up all of those gaps. That's what it is. And those are usually roughly around kind of in the 25, 30, depending upon the size, kind of the gauge of the culvert as well as the length of it as well. And then, of course, we have the fuel farm. This is another one that essentially doubled in price. The previous cost estimates were essentially not only slightly dated, but the labor proposal required increased in terms of what was originally spec versus what is actually kind of and anytime you get new engineering eyes on these projects, they kind of deliver some different understandings of what's required and what's not. This is one where we're not only going to have to get bigger tanks that are just at a certain cost price now for kind of just general supply. So we're going from what, 2,000 or 2,500 gallon tanks?
3,000 gallons of product roughly each.
Yeah.
Versus 2,000 where we're at now.
Yeah. And the reason for the size requirements for the tanks is it's actually one that industry standard wise, they actually, it's like getting like a niche part for getting a 2,000 gallon tank now. That's considered to be a longer time to deliver and actually just as costly. So the market has kind of pushed everybody to supply 3,000 plus tanks. So it's actually one, and then that's just the price, kind of where it is. And then also what you're talking about with all of the, I'll call them like the component type prices configured around the tanks in of itself that do all the sensoring to kind of meter out all the different intakes and outtakes, the intakes for when people go there and actually pull fuel out of the system. So essentially this is another one where subject to the last few years of kind of what everyone is doing in terms of material increases, this is kind of a standard reflection of the market. You know, it's just everything has more than doubled in price for a lot of these projects. So unfortunately, this was a prior somewhat scoped, but definitely reviewed and deferred project. And this is just more of the cost of deferment more so for the township. So all of these kind of led to a general sense of understanding that we have to do somewhat of an amendment process to the current capital because there's no way that we can absorb this type of hit in the in-year fiscal 24 without making a lot of adjustments around these projects as well. But just wanted to kind of get everybody up to speed. If you remember, we had that surplus interest that we had used from rollover funding from 23. You know, that's already been encumbered for 2 other capital critical projects that we also had. So this is just more of the reality that the township had kind of like a backlog of kind of key replacements on schedule. And we're just trying to use as much sizable in-year funding, rollover funding to kind of get these off the book because every single one of these projects, if deferred again, is only going to continue to go up. And it's not one where we can continue deferment with confidence that failure is not soon kind of lying after the fact. So unfortunately, the use of the surplus interest is not an option. So with that, we looked at the feasibility and criticality to include reducing the impact of planned park implementation projects. So another one is if you can't increase revenues, let's reduce expenditures. And of course, in our capital fund, we had kind of earmarked funding for the parks for the implementation of New Garden Hills and of course Smedley with the adopted master plan kind of in the 24 adopted, but subject to change due to adopted master plan. So those were going to be subject to revision anyway. But essentially the staff recommended priority was let's get these projects done and we'll find a better plan to kind of reduce the overall impact of other projects in the capital fund, the 5-year capital fund. So if we do have to do this, we're of course going to have to not be able to do these all at once. So the kind of operational criticality kind of ranked first. And so that was the fuel farm, which is also why we also kind of assessed or aligned with the use of ARPA funding. It was seen as a more immediate need. Mercer Mill kind of right behind that one, mostly because that's the one where any sizable event on that current infrastructure is subject to risk of failure of the actual pipe in and of itself, just because of how it was acting. And then of course the Wilkinson Drive, it's one where we have not the best solution in place, but it's not one where it's likely to kind of uproot and move it. It's just more of a general pooling. It's like a slow draining faucet, if you will. So with that, amendment considerations, we had to look at our interest income. This is one where, if you remember, we used a lot of that in our general fund, not in our capital fund. So we're having to find a way to figure that out. And of course, one thing we'll need to do is essentially find a way to increase the use of interest income back into the capital fund just to get that flexibility back in there and not having to sizably increase revenues through kind of a tax rate increase or wait for planned development as well. But to maintain the current projection for the FY25 at the current millage rate of 2.77, you know, we're having to find other feasible ways. So we're trying to look at this to not lift that tax rate. And that's kind of the staff strategy that we looked at this as well. So one thing that we had out there was, of course, what we implemented in 23. Granted, it was for the use of in-year revenue of open space EIT, and this has been corroborated with a bunch of different townships, is you have kind of 2 ways that you can use the Act 32 25% rule, we'll call it. You can use either what we're currently doing, which is the in-year levy revenue, or you can use the accrued fund balance percentage as well. Well, in this case, accrued fund balance is a much, much higher number. So that's one where we would say, if we have a sizable level of grant success, and then we have this remaining pot of funding of 25% of open space revenue, let's kind of pull the use of township capital fund cash and reduce that, and then use just open space cash to implement the parks. So that's for the Smedley Preserve as well as for New Garden Hills. And of course, the fund balance right now being around 1.8, that's subject to increase to roughly about 2.3, because of course, year over year, that revenue comes in terms of earned income tax to the open space fund. You know, you're looking at a pretty sizable balance of 25% that can help tremendously in the effort to implement park projects. And of course, this was the alternatively for purposes of allocation. This is what we were currently doing. That's one where we were essentially, the strategy last year was we had a massive kind of structural deficit. The goal was to preserve the use of cash. And so the immediate need was to put general fund obligations into any other fund that we could find to kind of reduce that commitment of general fund cash funding operations. And so we put about 125, which was roughly about 25% of the in-year annual revenue, which is right around 500K. So in order to do this, though, it's an either or. So we would have to intentionally put that revenue expenditure back into general fund to basically allow us to use this pot of money. So the good part of this is in terms of our kind of mid-year actuals updates in terms of revenues, expenditures, which we just got done doing our budgeting updates. We can absorb that type of hit in to the FY25 budget. And of course, that'll be assuming the 24 budget, we'll have to continue that until we finish this kind of, we'll call it crest, if you will, of open space implementation projects and get on the other side. And then ultimately in the future, we can move that effort back to kind of lower the impact of general fund. So the good news is we have a little bit of wiggle room for the general fund component of this. And we'll of course have this kind of fleshed out in a August briefing of an update of the actual budget with the following proposed budget amendment process as well. So this kind of looks like what you saw during the fall when we approved the capital plan, the 5-year plan. So this is just kind of what we previously did. You can see kind of all the construction costs here. You can see kind of the parks and recreation element of it as well. And then when we update this, this is where we're talking about kind of stripping and moving things out of the way. So what you're looking at here is this is where the roof came in, which was an update from 209. So that was the $390,000 roof project there going in. This was the absorbing of Pemberton Road coming back into 24. This is where you see the fuel farm replacement increase as well. And of course, this is the stormwater project for Mercer Mill. You'll see kind of in 25 plan for Wilkinson. And then of course, this over here is for the Broad Run restoration project, which is more kind of in flux in terms of project execution when it comes to revenues and expenditures, because it's part of a larger MS4 initiative with our res consultant and engineer with the PennDOT funded project. So it made sense to kind of move that to the right a little bit in terms of committed funding to do that project, because ultimately that might be a project that's self-actualized with other townships funding their MS4 obligations to execute their sediment reductions by using our project. So from a project budgeting standpoint, it didn't make sense to kind of to mix it in with all these projects. As you can see, the entire line for all parks and open space kind of moved to the open space fund. I don't have a specific open space fund breakdown here, but the whole point is it's just out of capital. And then with that, all the kind of remaining elements of this. So you can see it's kind of a net general reduction of everything, as well as a moving it to the left as possible, because as these projects kind of shift from here to here, these numbers are only going to increase. And so you're only going to get, for the sake of near-term savings, a sizable increase in future cost initiatives as well with the same projects, which is kind of what we were already doing. So the good news is we talked about our strategic priorities. If this is kind of the fleshed out plan, nearly 90% of all of our commitments is going towards infrastructure, which was the guidance that was provided as well. So we can literally show without a doubt, this is what we're funding with our township cash. Like this is where your tax dollars are going. It's to roads, it's to streets, initiatives, it's to culverts, stormwater, and you know, we would want to keep it that way because that's of course the number one priority. So with that, how does this impact our cash? This is more of a fluid situation. So that's one where you get into a lot more of what is our net cash position. And of course, this is always subject to change. But it's one where you can see this is kind of the overall impact of expenditures with those revenue sources offsetting these expenditures. But this is the real line to kind of look at. So you can see in the current state, you know, without an increase of interest income in 27, as well as, you know, kind of committing to that that transfer increase in 26, you know, we're getting pretty low in that net cash position. So if we kind of continue on in this pace without understanding that we need to grow as a township to kind of unencumber the use of interest income from the general fund, you know, we're going to have to change this plan again. So the good news is this gets us through the next few years. The bad news is it doesn't necessarily solve for the preceding, you know, future as well, but it does fix things that need to be fixed. So that's kind of a way of saying instead of deferring capital, we're deferring the potential increases down the road a little bit. Not the best plan, but that's where we're at right now. And that's, of course, already been identified as a number one priority in terms of funding infrastructure. It's also to develop and grow as a township, to grow the tax base, to increase revenues. That's kind of the plan. So not the tax rate, increase the tax base. So the amendment positives, just because we're getting rid of all of the kind of parks implementation initiatives, we're saving roughly $3 million over 5 years in cash, which is good. That got eaten back into a little bit because at some point we're going to have to increase that interest income to cover some of those paving program obligations down the road. So that savings margin will come down a little bit, but overall it's a net savings just because you're not funding the parks implementations. So that's good. And of course, that was a common narrative of, you know, why are we using taxpayer funding and property taxes to support parks initiatives? This kind of essentially separates the two. The 5-year plan, just in paving program alone, because we did update that a little bit because we had to as an exercise for this project. You're talking about nearly $7.5 million in road paving alone up until 2028. We already talked about the percentage of that. It does continue the planned use of interest income in general fund. We talked about how that would need to be adjusted over time. And the whole point is as the tax base revenue increases, general fund's requirement for using interest is reduced. And of course, that just transitions over towards the capital fund for two uses. One is to implement projects. Two is what we would like to get to is to grow the principal amount on that amount in and of itself, because 5% is not always going to be the case. So in order to get a similar amount of interest from the same balance, you in a lower rate environment, you have to grow the principal. So it's like getting $1 million from 20 million at 5% is one thing, but if you go down to 4%, you need like, 22, you need a larger principal amount to get the same amount of generated interest as well. So always growing that principal is going to be at some point, we're going to have to commit to having consistent transfers into that to support that increase. And then, of course, we talked about it's kind of that narrative component of it, kind of like with the airport fund. It's kind of self-sufficient for the use of its own revenues to support airport matters. Open space would be kind of considered the same. It would be almost like a true enterprise fund for all-inclusive parks, recreation, inclusive of open space initiatives. The risks, of course, we had to move Wilkinson to the right a little bit. It doesn't include stormwater master plan type updates, which we're currently actively getting generated by Pannoni. So that could also come in and you'll see a bunch of projects that are currently not spec'd or recognized that will need to be addressed. That broad run stream restoration project kind of assumes a possible alternate funding for that. And then of course, right now, this is kind of the current iteration of it, but the FY25 budgeting process will yield kind of additions to the capital plan, and we'll have to absorb kind of where those are going to fit based off of this plan with some net reductions, but at least gives us good guidance. And then when you think about open space, when you kind of park the committable amount of revenue for the fund balance, you reduce the ability to do kind of other kind of large scale open space acquisitions. That might be a pro and a con simultaneously, but it does at least reduce the capacity of the open space review board to identify properties based off of we had in the capital plan, their project scope schedule over the course of the next 5 years. So with that, I know this is fun material. Any questions? But this is kind of the goal for tonight is to give sentiment back to what would be perceived as a good amount of guidance for staff to come back in August with a finite defined amendment to adopt. And that would adopt not only the actual capital plan, but we'll have other areas within the general fund and airport fund, all the funds, in terms of just a mid-year update. So otherwise, scrap the plan completely and completely move on, and we'll go back to the drawing board.
Any questions, comments?
Are there any specific areas you're looking for, like any direction on, or just to keep
Just in terms of sense of like, this is because, I mean, obviously the sticker shock from some of the cost increases kind of drove this whole exercise in the first place. This is the only way that we could see based off of the limited amount of sources of revenue to kind of fit everything in. So this is the still fit it all together plan. So this is how we put the pieces of the puzzle together. If it's one where the board is like, okay, we'll just won't do that project anymore, that kind of guidance, like, or what your priorities are. That's kind of the inputs that we need to kind of come up with a more defined plan. If it's one where, this is trying to be the most have your cake and eat it too approach.
I think Christy said she can take care of the Wilkinson culvert, right? You got.
I was just gonna say, I actually think what you guys have been doing has been great. Like I don't know if we had any storms like we had a couple of years ago. So it's hard to tell. Yeah. But,
yeah, you never know when you're gonna get inland flooding from some of these
Yeah.
hurricanes coming through. I mean, the fact that Beryl came in and essentially did like almost like a 270-degree turn and came all the way back to like, if you can hit the Yucatan Peninsula, Texas, and then Maine in like a span of 3 days, you can't chart out what's gonna happen in the fact
yeah.
of it. And that's exactly what happened to identify some of these issues in the first place was inland storm flooding from tropical storms and hurricanes. And that's ultimately something that we can never really understand when it's gonna happen. So you just have to kind of be prepared with improvements to your infrastructure.
I mean, Kenny, do you have a preference on the order of?
Well, that was the staff.
That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would defer to you.
Yeah, that's pretty much in there, doing the fuel farm first, working on Wilkinson as well, and then just due to timeline, Mercerville next year.
Just whispered over to Steve. On the other side, I guess that wetlands study, that's on Wilkinson as well?
Yeah, there's potential for a wetland study needed on Wilkinson. We'll know that when we get a little bit more into it, figure out what we need to do and all that.
And I don't know if somebody needs to like reach out to the guy or what happens, but like, I believe my understanding is Wilkinson that goes in and like cuts that meadow.
Sorry?
Wilkinson, like one of the Wilkinson family members like goes and cuts that meadow down like every year. Absolutely like drives me nuts, but that's really controlling some of the flooding. So I'm not sure if somebody should mention not doing that. But it doesn't help the culvert because the problem's on the other side.
Right.
So I'm assuming that would just control some of the sediment downstream.
In bulk, the biggest impact is really kind of where the scope of the paving program really lies. If you remember, we kind of did the Pemberton switch to the left because it was spec to be a 25 project. And then we immediately filled in Pemberton's absence with kind of a two-phased approach of Hillendale Roads. That's another one where, looks like the surface of the moon. And it's one where it was originally spec for 3 years. It just made sense to do it in 2. But then ultimately, when you took that, because previously it was 25, 26, 27, we moved to 25, 26, which created a hole here. It's, hey, then the next one right behind it. So we're in no shortage of sizable capital infrastructure needs. So right behind that was, I think, New Garden Road in kind of 2 installments as well, because that's one of significance, as well as Scarlet Road. So this is the backlog. So this is never going to be an empty chain, like this is always going to be full.
Sure.
Yeah, across the board.
And I know
And we
that
only hope that we have enough liquid fuels to help offset the balance as well. So everybody stop buying EVs. I'm not
I
saying
know
that
in
out
terms
loud.
of like roads, you guys have done studies to prioritize, what needs it. So, I mean, I think we're in a,
The updated assessment, the road paving analysis was approved for this year, but it's going to be done after the paving program is complete. So we'll have an understanding of what is still out there. That's going to be more for finalizing the capital plan because we're going to see conditional analysis updates there. But
Right.
that probably won't be until probably late September, October. So it's going to be last minute to incorporate those changes.
oh, everything's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And unfortunately, like, I mean, not to kind of throw it out there, but a little bit, the pending ability to identify all other stormwater initiatives is kind of a blind eye for the township right now. So that's why that stormwater inventory is critical. We're also going to get, and I don't know how soon it'll be impacted in terms of future planning, but the TIFAC, which is the Traffic Impact Fee Advisory Committee, is going to yield that capital kind of intersection analysis. And so that's another one where you're just going to have another grouping of sizable capital projects kind of put on board. So the good news is we're getting everything identified. The bad news is everything we're identifying is going to be extremely expensive.
Expensive, I know.
And that's one where, you know, we'll do everything we can internally to do that. But given standard revenues, our own unique situation of having interest income, which is actually an advantage over a lot of other townships that don't have that. There's not a whole, and grants, there's not a whole lot of, you know, other options that you can look at. So we'll have to do some very probably future, we'll call them prioritization initiatives of picking one over another. Because I can see those initiatives kind of starting to have an impact on how much we can do in paving per year, because you're just going to have to kind of carve out capacity for it.
You guys have been really busy. Thank you. I mean, it's visible. I mean, you can clearly see all of the work that everyone is.
I think we're updated for the paving program to go in August, kind of on schedule.
Working out that schedule with them today, it looks like they're going to be starting 24th, so next Wednesday.
Okay.
Starting milling and stuff like that.
So we're,
Face feel sorry for you guys. So hot. So hot.
yeah.
Can you do that in October?
But that's going to be something. And then right behind that, this building is going to be more of September for the roof,
Yep.
but
I tried. So hot.
It's terrible.
is there any other kind of guides? I mean, is
No,
it
you
considered
guys
to be,
I mean,
Yeah, you guys have put a lot of work
Been
into it,
doing a
so,
lot.
yeah.
I hope
it's not
the
the perfect
residents.
plan, it's just the plan.
No, but I mean,
front
you
of
can
us, yeah.
actually see the plan and I think you can see the
Okay.
progress that's been made this past year. It's
And the need to implement.
remarkable.
Then expect for August, we will come back with a formal amendment. It'll have a lot of similar slides, but that'll be where we'll actually be able to like incorporate this into an implementable plan and kind of kick these projects kind of into motion, which the first one will be, immediate will be the fuel pump. You know, we're gonna try to get that secured by this fall, so.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, next up, we have 311 Reporting Hub.
This is where I get to geek out a little bit here.
You're just now doing that.
So while I'm bringing this up, the effort for the GIS project was one where we committed a scope of work for the 24 budget using ARPA funding to deliver on some kind of advancing of abilities to interact with the township when it comes to reporting of issues and getting those kind of cases managed on a kind of day in and day out basis. and I'll stand to do this while I'm doing it, but just so I can actually point to it. But essentially what we're trying to do is create like a 311 hub, if you're familiar with just kind of overall reporting centers. 311 is kind of that formal kind of complaint phone system basis that's kind of elevated to now to being more either kind of a proprietary software tool that you use. You'll get a vendor, they'll have their own specific thing that they built out and you use that. Or you can go through the use of GIS, which Esri, which is the kind of most top of mind. They're like the Amazon of GIS, but you need to have software engineers who know how to configure the environment to build the tool in of itself. So think of it like an advanced use of Excel. And so this is what our current team has built for us for the township. This is kind of in its final iteration. They're going to go through some kind of final grooming of it, but essentially this would be available. So in lieu of that report and issue component on the township website where it goes to that like website-based kind of input, you kind of submit a complaint and that actually goes to our emails. It gets back to staff and staff processes it. It would land here. This is kind of the same thing. It's kind of based off of how you fill in the actual report. It goes to wherever it needs to go, but it's more of an intuitive tool for the end user because we're thinking about residents and businesses being able to submit stuff to allow to kind of add notes, add pictures, add as much information about the issue as possible while filling out a workflow that cleans the reporting data on the back end so we can better categorize and kind of chart it into more of sensible issues, understanding of the issues that are happening as it relates to kind of mostly kind of property maintenance issues, public works issues, you kind of name it across the board. So you would come here and you would kind of click OK, and I can like submit an issue right now, but if I wanted to drop an issue here at Town Hall, actually, if I wanted to do the one that I did last time, there was a kid doing a TikTok dance in front of Town Hall last week, I think it was, or the week prior to it. So I wanted to submit this as an unruly behavior in front of a public facility. I could do that. So that's one where I can file it under a nuisance, but I'll go back and do that. So you would essentially, hit this button, you'd fill out this workflow form, submit pictures, hit submit, and then it would go into the back end, and there's kind of an internal view, and kind of think of it like a superintendent list. And then based off of where it's coming in, it would either go to code enforcement department, it would go to public works, it would go to anywhere it needed to go within the township, and they could also provide that kind of customer feedback as well within the system. So, and then we would tie the data coming from this into our kind of, we'll call it more of the ERP system. So it's mostly just kind of an Excel, they call it like an FTP bounce process. So you just take a download of information, automatically shoot it into the other system and it forms reports there. But essentially it's two-one. It's a better customer experience and it's better reporting. And basically you're not paying the cost of an ongoing subscription. You're paying for the cost to configure as a one-time expense, which is why the ARPA funding made a lot of sense for something like this. This is just one example. GIS can be used for countless levels of kind of replacement of proprietary solutions. You just need the right team to identify to be able to build it for you. But once it's in place, it's kind of set it and forget it for the most part, because it's not built on code. It's built on the actual just tweaking the environments to get everything to kind of flow and work.
The workflow.
Yeah.
So would the submitter be able to follow us through? Like, will they be able to see what they submitted and?
Yes, yeah, you'd have kind of like an issue where, yep, yeah, so
Sorry, you may have answered that already.
there's I think a ticket tracker kind of thing component to this, and so hopefully this one, it wasn't one turned off, but kind of like charts everything out and it'll put everything on the board. So there's kind of like a public facing dashboard view. You can be like, hey, what's wrong in New Garden Township? You can go there. I don't know why people would kind of be interested in that, but essentially kind of just looks like chicken pox on the township, and you can kind of slice it and dice it based off of case types, and it kind of goes on to it. So it's just a different way to kind of translate what's happening in the township. Other than just generic reports, this is more of an interactive tool.
I cannot even imagine.
So I don't know if this is going to be used for good or bad in the future, but at least it's transparent. So we'll see.
They want to undo this.
Yeah.
I'm going to make you regret this.
So this is just an update. We're planning on trying to get this into live environment by this early fall. It just requires some final grooming. And think of this as like a, like a 70% solution right now. They're mostly trying to figure out all of this, and then they're going to clean it up at the very, very end. into a final kind of like an experience viewer kind of view. So it looks a little bit more like a software piece, but
This is great. I
all
think
in all,
a lot of
Oh, I
times
think
people
it's
make
good.
these, complaints, they come to the meeting and they're like, what's the update? So this will be really
No way to.
great for like communication tools.
in progress, but, and then there's
That
actually,
will also be great. I mean, Richard Gall can just go in there, clickety clack and see what's going on in the
Yeah.
neighborhoods,
if I go to newgarden.org, the next manager report item is update of our consultant, Michael Baker International. Part of their proposal involves them commissioning kind of like a landing pad website, splash page, whatever you will, to kind of structure all the information in the process, timeline, events, everything. So they've already built that environment for us. So that was good. Shocker, they used ArcGIS online to build the website because it's a pretty easy, quick way to get up there. But if you just go to our website under departments and community development safety, which is zoning is a community development process, you'll see not only interactive zoning map, which is the old kind of software that we have in place right now with our map, but the zoning ordinance and map update, of course, which will take you to a new website. And that's where you'll land on this page, which is essentially going to be our zoning update feed. And so everything that you want to get in terms of, well, number one, if you want to search for stuff, but two, if you want to sign up to receive specific emails, Michael Baker kind of submits those kind of out into the generic public when they're coming up on upcoming events. You get all of the kind of project background, what's going on. It takes a little bit, as well as all of the resources that are there, as well as kind of just the general alley. So it's essentially kind of just an information resource page for everything. So transparency should not be something that is a complaint within this process, because it's one we're translating pretty significantly in terms of mass communications and an actual resource page for everybody to go to. You can see the actual RFP that we bidded to, so there's no kind of stone unturned here. So any questions about the zoning page? I believe on August 19th at our next public meeting at 6 o'clock, they're going to do kind of their first public briefing for the general audience as well. So everybody will kind of get a look behind what the status of the project is, which they've done a pretty good amount of work to date. So
Right.
that is all I have.
Right. Thank you. Okay. All right. We have upcoming Parks and Recs meetings, Rhythm and Brews coming up, notices, fun things going on. So just familiarize yourself with that. And any other thoughts, comments, questions, words of wisdom? All right, do we have a motion to adjourn then? Second. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.